All right, thank you for listening to this podcast. This episode of Literally is sponsored by Lexicon and Line. Case, tell us a little something about Lexicon and Line.
Lexicon and Line, it does three things. They are communications consultants. They teach professional business writing and speaking courses, and they are research and data evaluation experts.
And you can find everything about Lexicon and Line at lexicononline.com. Please give them a visit, and thank you so much for sponsoring this podcast, Lexicon and Line.
This is Case Johnston. This is the Literally Podcast. Today we're doing a special edition from the Monarch, the Literary Deathmatch Podcast Night from Ogden, Utah.
Nice.
We'll take it, Brandon. We take that one? Okay, we'll do it. Holy shit. Tonight we have 6 writers with us, including the host of Literary Deathmatch, Adrian Todd Zuniga. Adrian Todd was on our podcast about 6 months ago, I think, with we talked about his book, Collision Theory. And so we're just going to go around the table really quickly here at the Monarch in downtown Ogden on 25th Street and introduce ourselves and maybe just give a glimpse into what we're working on currently. So personally, Case Johnston, I am working on getting this podcast started. You're in.
I'm David Lindes. I'm a singer-songwriter and writer living in Salt Lake City. I'm originally from Guatemala. Right now I'm working on a couple of things. One is a book about my search for my biological father. And I'm trying to begin to write really short fiction.
I'm Jan Bottiglieri. I'm a poet from suburban Chicago, Illinois. I'm also an editor with the poetry annual Rhino. My book that just came out from Blaze Vox Press is called Everything Seems Significant, the Blade Runner poems, and it's an entire book of poetry about the movie Blade Runner.
Awesome.
That's so cool.
Love that. Okay, I'm Laura Stott, and I'm a poet that lives here in Ogden, and I'm currently getting a book ready to put out next January that's a collaboration with my sister, and she did all these paintings, and it's called Blue Nude Migration, and so I've been dealing with the drama of that, and I like writing about bears.
Sweet. I'm Jake Alvey. I've been doing a lot of copywriting lately, but I'm also a poet, a musician, and a voice actor. I'm currently putting some stuff out to Frontier Poetry. I just made some submissions for their one of their upcoming publications. I do a lot of live performance, especially through music, but also with poetry.
My name is Kara Van De Graff, and I've just recently put out a book called Spitting Image with the Crab Orchard series in poetry. And so I'm just kind of on the heels of that, and I'm starting now to reawaken and kind of begin writing some new poems towards a second collection, which is hard.
Yeah.
I'm Adrian Todd Zuniga. I'm the creator and host of Literary Deathmatch. My novel Collision Theory came out at some point ago, and I'm currently working on producing a movie that I think Wayne Gretzky just said he would executive produce. So we're very excited, and that's going to hopefully will change our lives and our bank accounts. And beyond that, I'm working on a novel called Superhero, which is hopefully will be my second novel. It's gigantic, but I'm slowly paring it down to 350 words.
Oh, 350 words?
Yeah, I'm
lot
just
of
kidding. It went from 710 pages to 592 in one draft, so now I'm looking to get it into the 450 range. But I don't know.
All right.
Yeah, we'll see.
Great. So we're going to talk tonight. So everybody's here, gathered here. That sounds really religious. We're gathered here today
Dearly beloved.
to talk. We're all going to go down to Good Company Theater later on at 7:00 tonight, and we're going to partake in it's where I'm staying with the religious themes. It's all my Catholicism coming out.
Where's the wine?
We're gathered here. We're partaking.
It's in the car. Jake, it's in the car.
So we're going to discuss transubstantiation. We're all going to go down to Good Company Theater on 24th Street in Ogden, Utah, and we're going to participate in Literary Deathmatch. Adrian, do you want to kind of give for those who have not been a part of it in the past, or those who don't know what it is, give us kind of that summary of where it got started and where we are now and why?
Yeah, so it's just the show itself. It's 4 authors reading their own work for 7 minutes or less, and they're judged by 3 all-star judges in the categories of literary merit, performance, and intangibles. The judges hear the readers, then cracked wise, and then pick 2 of them to go on to the finals, 2 of the authors to go on to the finals, and then they compete in a vaguely literary game to decide the winner.
See, I told you wrong, Laura. I'm sorry. I told you prepare 2 pieces.
Oh, yeah. Never prepare 2 pieces, ever. Case really messed up. Okay. No, I'm just kidding. It's very confusing. So I don't blame you for hearing
4.
that. Oh,
because you told me twice.
Okay, right.
That's right. Double
that makes
down.
sense.
I might have tripled down.
Yeah. Tonight actually will be our 499th show. We've done it in 63 cities around the world. And it's been going on since March 6, 2006, which just saying that, it reminds me when I was watching Making a Murderer, or whatever that was, the Netflix show. On March 6, 2006, there's an event that happens on the show, and the date comes up on the screen. I was like, oh, yeah, so lives are very different. Different things happen at different places. Doing it the first time in Ogden. I think it's our 4th Utah show, so I'm very excited about that. And it's I'm on tour. But the one question I wanted to ask, and Casey, you can speak to this because you judged last year in Salt Lake City, but just sort of when you found out, or when you got an invite to do it, I just wonder if everybody can go around. You can be totally honest. I'm not going to be offended. We've done this so many times. Oh, wait, you know what? I feel like I just had I had a thought, which I should tell you, something that happened in the literary deathmatch history. And I thought of Jeffrey Eugenides. He judged for us in Finland, episode 1. And it was an all-Finnish show except he and I. And he judged intangibles. And at one point, he had this hat on, like a Russian-style hat. And when he said that he wore it because he dated a Finnish girl when he was in his late teens or early 20s. But they had to break up because she was allergic to his semen. So there are those kind of literary histories that come up. Because I'll talk tonight. I'm going to do a monologue about Stephen King, and I'm going to do some Roald Dahl informations and all these different things. But I always think about how the show will eventually progress to where I'm telling stories about allergic to semen. But so that being said, I just wondered if you could talk about how, like, your immediate reaction, because a lot of people don't know what the show is before they get invited. Of course they should live to do it, but I don't know, I thought that might be fun just to hear people go like, I didn't want to do it. But anyway, Case.
I was scared about not being witty enough as a judge. That was my biggest, I think I would have been more comfortable being a presenter than being a judge, because it's, you're on the spot and you got to act smart.
Yeah.
And that's tough. But I had heard about it many times because of friends who had done it. And I know Danielle Susi had done it, been part of it in Chicago a couple times, and Danielle and I are good friends. And so she had talked about it quite a bit, and seen it. And but overall, I was like, it was a good time. But I was, honestly, like, how sometimes it's hard
you were
to
great.
say something that people might not think is dumb.
You were great, and I remembered thinking that, and how I always will say that to people, but you actually were. But
you too.
Did you panic? Because when I've had to judge in emergencies, it's like it doesn't last long. Like, you don't have that much time, and it's like there's a panic to anyway.
Yeah, and I wanted, and with the judging too, is I wanted to talk about the work too, because there's some brilliant writers involved in it, and obviously all across the world, and I wanted to be able to do both.
Yeah.
And so I was nervous.
That's cool.
So Case reached out to me via email, and Google saved me. Right? Literary Deathmatch is a stellar brand, by the way, because I knew right away that you cared about words, and we were going to have fun.
Cool.
Too, and that those things were together. And then Google took me to a video of Adrian hanging out with Neil Gaiman. And okay, this is a thing. Well, let's go.
Yeah.
It's on, man.
It is wild about Neil Gaiman, because he judged for us in Edinburgh, and which apparently I say terribly, Edinburgh. But apparently, like, he gets paid so much money to do events, but he'll also, like, if you just ask him to do stuff, he's like, yeah, that sounds fun. He was amazing.
Well, like David, Google saved me because my first order of business was to determine whether or not the phrase death match was being used in a metaphorical sense.
Yeah.
I took like a Mad Max sort of thought when I first read it. It was great. Yeah, 2 men enter, 1 man leaves sort of thing.
Me too. So So that's why I'm wearing the skins of my enemies right now.
Yeah, it's perfect. It's a very, very opulent and very
Thank you.
visceral garment.
Thank you.
So I didn't Google anything.
And she took advice from me, which I tried to be right.
Yeah, well, finally, a couple days ago, I said, "Hey, by the way, how does this work?" Because I'd been just letting my imagination go with it for a few weeks, and I was kind of picturing the Colosseum and lions or something. Anyway, but and then I was thinking, well, I've got, a garden full of tomatoes, so maybe I can bring a basket of those. But
to bribe the judges or throw it yourself?
No,
You're terrible.
These are delicious.
Yeah,
just let them rot a little bit.
I was thinking, the whole you see it on the boobies,
Right,
it's real.
Yeah.
So, but I'm excited. I think it'll be fun. So
it'll be the greatest night we've all ever spent together.
Yeah, a friend of mine used the phrase "poetic punches" a few days ago in reference to it, and I kind of fell in love with that phrase.
Yeah.
So.
Nice and plosive.
Yeah.
I got the invitation, was immediately excited. Honestly, most of what I do is live performance, so as soon as I did a Google search actually and saw, of course, Neil Gaiman, I saw everybody just having a good time participating. I saw Adrian, and I was completely sold. I was excited. I was ready to just get up there. I've got a nice outfit planned for the evening. Maybe throwing my arms up here and there. I like to be a bit of a showman, so. Feel pretty capable, feel pretty ready.
Yeah.
But the phrase deathmatch was perfect. I was like, because sometimes you go to a poetry event and it's a little bit more demure, it's a little bit more pared down, it's very subtle. There's, candles lit, they dim the lights, you are wearing your best dressed clothing, you're, making strange odes to things like your bath salts or whatever it is you use to calm down. So it's really nice to get on your feet and draw a little blood.
Right. Yeah. That's great.
It's a really good description of what I do for a living. I heard about the death match because I think I gave a reading last year with someone who had participated in it.
Ooh.
But because I'm more of the bath salts kind of poet,
just not the Floridian ones, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think of myself as like a performance poet, but I have a lot of experience thinking on my feet about poetry because I teach. I'm a professor down at UVU, and I'm working every day with students on their writing, and sometimes need to be quite quick about it. But I think I found out about this from my colleagues at Weber. I think they reached out and said, "Hey, do you want to come do this with us?" And it has been a while since I've been up here and gotten the chance to hang out with y'all, so I was like, yes, absolutely. And that's how I got here. And now that I'm hearing all of the research, I'm feeling intimidated.
Right. It's funny about Weber because Weber is host to Abraham Smith, who's the only 5-time literary deathmatch champion and the only 5-0 person.
Amazing.
It's impossible to basically the finale becomes quite random. Like we do things to randomize it, so winning is insane. Just like winning, you'll just be like, oh wow, yeah, that seemed random, but I happen to win. But him going 5-0 is crazy. The only other person that has any shot at him is Simon Rich. And I saw Simon at the WGA Awards. No big deal, but I was nominated for writing a Madden movie that Mahershala Ali spoke words. I said, no big deal, guys.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But I saw him and I was like, oh, yeah, we should have you back. He goes, well, I'm undefeated. And it's funny because you wonder if people ever think about it. And I find out, because I have a medal in my pocket, we had a printing issue with the medals. So tonight's won't say Literary Deathmatch Ogden champion. It'll say LDM Bistrica, which is a small city in Romania. Don't fret. It's the right medal.
Always
I am tickled pink.
Bistrica is like, that Anyway, but Simon was like, "Oh no, I'm undefeated. I don't think I'm gonna go up against." Because I mentioned, I go, "Oh, we should have you and Abraham read at the same time," and he's like, "I'm not risking my perfect record."
Oh wow! Like, I lose that belt.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Oh, I wish Abe was
time
here
for a
tonight.
cut.
Oh, yeah.
This is
I
Case
think it's the
Johnson's
reason why I'm
Literally
here,
Cut podcast. We're now podcasting from Bistritza, and the winner tonight will receive that medal. Yeah, that's cool. That's whoever gets it. I'm going to be jealous.
Yeah.
It's on.
It's on Bistritza. Cool. Well, so when it comes to traveling, I'm guessing you meet a lot of poets. Are we all the same? I'm not a poet. I'm the only one who's not a poet.
Not really.
There we go. We're not poets together.
We're not.
I have one published poem.
Poet.
Self-published.
Poet.
Poet.
Are they all the same?
It's funny because the first person I thought of was Billy Collins. So then I was like, is everybody like Billy Collins? And yes. No. It's weird because the poets, if poets succeed, you generally find that they're quite kind and gracious and whimsical. And that's kind of an amazing place because they're like, yeah, I kind of chose this. Nobody goes into poetry and is like, okay, here comes my millions. It's like if you enter screenwriting or if you enter boxing or I don't know, there's a lot of fields that you can enter where you're like, okay, I'm going to try to make it big. And if you don't, you can be resentful and be like, oh, the American dream, I got left behind. Let me go watch The Joker and find it to be a really great movie. I just saw The Joker, so
It must be fresh.
Yeah, it's
I like
quite
that
a complicated
the
thing.
three profession choices are screenwriting, poetry, or boxing. These are the things you consider.
It is the literary death match.
That is the landscape.
I think that's my next question.
Gloves
So
off.
if you weren't a poet, which of the other two would you be? A
Yeah, that's
boxer
great. Yeah.
or a screenwriter?
I was going to say a
pirate?
financial
A pirate?
analyst, but yeah, pirate's good.
I would take boxer, honestly. That wouldn't be
Yeah,
half
yeah.
bad. Maybe an MMA cage fighter. I've definitely
Right.
got the build for it.
Yeah, exactly.
I would only write screenplays about boxing.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Poets.
And poets who become boxers.
Make $1 million
Yes.
baby.
It's raging goal. What do you guys think? Would you say all writers / poets are the same? Do you think all poets? Jan, you know that all poets are the same. You guys all look the same. Y'all talk the
We
same.
We do. I can't tell us apart. But yeah, I think it's really great to hear you say that poets are generally kind, people, because I think you have to be. I think being a poet, you have to first learn how to be kind to yourself. You never really learn that. But because you're paying so much attention to the world or trying to, you see a lot of you have to kind of be on the lookout for that. So, that's good to hear that most poets are like that. I don't know. I know a lot of poets and I meet a lot of poets, and they're a fun group.
Yeah.
I find it to be a really diverse and interesting group myself. So,
I went and visited some middle school kids it's probably 2 years ago, where one of my former students is now their teacher, and I don't remember teaching her this, but she kept saying over and over to her students in speaking about poetry that poetry creates empathy, and I loved it, and and it's something I've thought about a lot since then. She's a great teacher.
I strongly believe that the greatest thing that can be created in the world is a poem. That it does more and is more extraordinary than anything else. But that also means that like 90% of poetry is not great, and 9% is like fantastic, amazing, whatever, in a great range. And then there's that like 0.01%, which is just so transcendent and so incredible. And it does it in such short order. It's amazing. I'm so blown away by poetry. Yeah, and that's all I have to say about that. Now I'm going to sit back in my chair. Not really. I guess I just ruined everything.
No, there's
just
still
raised
some
the
momentum.
stakes,
That's
man.
right, man. You dropped a bomb in the middle of the
Exactly.
conversation.
Like, no,
Now I
voice
gotta-
acting's the most important thing, says Jay.
Boxing.
Now, wait a minute.
David
well, no,
says.
it's Emily
Boxing.
Dickinson's "It Blows the Top of My Head Off."
Yeah.
I mean, it's like she meant it kind of literally, not literally, but close.
Yeah,
I
I guess if
think.
we're gonna keep
Yeah.
the metaphor going, it kind of packs a punch.
Right.
Yeah.
It can hit you right in the gut. It can hit you right in the head. It can hit you somewhere in between those places, or maybe somewhere behind. I don't know.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a big reason why I got into poetry, and I think the reason why I like to kind of follow up that question is every poet the same. You end up hearing everybody's individual voice, And that empathy building that happens allows you to hear that voice within these very sort of concentrated hits, these stanzas, these flowing pieces of language that may not necessarily go for however long, but can succinctly put things into place. Kind of like a great meme.
Yeah.
In today's parlance, I guess.
Can I ask one question real quick? There's almost nothing I hate more than a poem about poetry. And I wonder if you guys are like, no, those are okay. Are there any good poems about poetry that's like the poem is the... I'm automatically like, no, I want to hear about somebody's foot getting cut off or a
I
dad
am
dying.
automatically inflicted with a little bit of, I don't know, maybe like trepidation whenever I hear somebody's like, I wrote a poem about writing a poem. I get a little cringy.
Yeah.
But...
What am I going to read tonight now?
Well, it's a good question, but I'm not going to answer it. I was thinking about something else. When it
Just talk about that.
When it comes to poetry and not being a poet, when, like you said, it creates that empathy, and there's that beauty in it, and there's that voice in it. And I don't want to talk about process because we always talk about process. I don't want to talk about process, but before I write in the morning, I don't read novels or I don't read nonfiction. I read poetry. So for 25 minutes before I start to write, I read poetry, and I'm not a poet. It's just getting into, just the beauty of it and what it says, and it makes you think, and then all of a sudden it puts you in a place where you're asking yourself questions, and especially with nonfiction, you get to a place you're asking yourself hard questions that you have to answer, and I don't find that I can get that from any other genre before writing at 5 a.m. with coffee.
That's
it's,
awesome.
It's beautiful that way.
I just want to talk about process. What do you guys do before you write? Do you have a system or something you consistently do?
Now that I have 2 kids, I don't have any system. Yeah,
like,
I just write when you can.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's nice to have something nearby, like as long as I have the means to do it. But I think my favorite poem I wrote this summer, I was sitting next to the swimming pool, with the newborn, and so just. For me, it's just kind of just anytime I can, just getting some words out.
I think if there's anything to be sort of nailed down as a sort of a process for me, is it really helps with a few drinks sometimes. That's like a little bit of a lubricant, but going to concerts, being surrounded by other art, I think I'm a pretty ekphrastic writer, so I feel a lot of like different types of music. I look at like newer art forms, even look at meme culture, things like that. But a lot of the time, some of my biggest inspiration, sometimes the best people to keep around me are the people in my life that I see as poets who don't even consider themselves writers, the people who say really funny phrases, the people that could kill you with one line. I don't know, I like the comedy and like sort of the, I don't know, I guess like sort of the democratic aspects of language that people employ when they're just hanging out, speaking colloquially, not really giving a shit, so to speak. Just being with friends, being around like good groups of people, and then just absorbing that and letting that sort of filter its way through my brainscape and splattering out something that sounds like cohesive language to some degree.
Kara?
I think I actually actively resist any kind of system that I try to use to regiment my writing life, which is not something I like about myself, actually, because I'm so busy now that I think I would probably benefit from having a system. But I for whatever reason, I have to feel like it's something that I'm like choosing my way into, or kind of like the myth of inspiration. I don't think that's actually true. I think if I only wrote when I felt inspired, then I would, get to write like one thing a year, because I don't have a lot of time to be inspired right now. But I do agree that I think interacting with other art is really useful for me, including poems. That if I'm reading new work by somebody that I'm really kind of engaged with, usually that kind of sets off a chain reaction for me, like association wise, and then I come to something that I want to write about that way.
Dave, these people are insane. They have no process. What about you?
I'm a machine, man.
Yeah.
I wake up at 5, I run 5 miles, and then I write for 90 minutes. That's
Wow.
That's beautiful.
How long does it take you to run 5 miles?
60 minutes. So
Wow.
I'm running 5 12-minute miles. And I'm telling you, I'm not saying that I write great stuff,
Right.
but I write. And I write
Yeah.
for 90 minutes.
There you go.
You know?
That's so wild that you, because for me, I put on headphones and like, after showering and all that, and then I go to a WeWork lately, and then I'll just hunker down there for 4 to 6 hours. But that's because I'm abandoning ever paying rent again, apparently. Wonderful. But the problem, I find this problem right now is that the political moment is so, I don't want to say engaging, I should say exhausting, but I'm listening to a lot of political stuff, so I'm sort of not falling into the work when I sit. Like if I listen to the Bookworm podcast, I'd love that one. And just like listening to writers talk can sometimes help me, but right now it's like the daily and I'm like, oh God, what the fuck? How long do we have left?
Right.
Oh my gosh, that's right. That's been a
crazy.
big influence on my writing lately too. It's like really interesting because in like comedy too, there's almost like this nihilistic absurdity that everybody's taken on, where it's just like you have comedians like Eric Andre, like Hannibal Buress more specifically. I've been kind of following those guys and just the constant, the era of just the constant news cycle, the constant election cycle going on. It's
Speaking
absolutely
of
wild.
Those two guys, Hannibal Buress has judged Literary Deathmatch twice, but each time we had people drop out or get mixed up, so he had to judge Literary Merit twice, and he's because he had written for Saturday Night Live, so it's like, you're a writer, and he was like, I can't believe I've got to judge writing. Yeah, I was gonna read. This is a spoiler for the show, but Ursula K. Le Guin, I've found her writing schedule. And her schedule was at 5:30 a.m. wake up and lie there and think, or you can run 5 miles or that one. 6:15 a.m. get up and eat breakfast, lots. 7:15 a.m. get to work, writing. Noon lunch, 1 to 3 reading / music. 3 to 5 correspondence, maybe house cleaning. 5 to 8 make dinner and eat it. After 8 p.m. I tend to be very stupid and we won't talk about this. So that's a pretty good schedule. But,
solid
for a person who doesn't have a day job.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, to only give that many hours. But I don't know, I wear out, and then I'm just like, oh man, it's literally like I can feel myself frazzling or checking Twitter, just sort of like wanting to do other stuff. And I'm like, no, come back. And, it's like I'm working at half the speed or a quarter of the speed. That's crazy. Do you think songwriting is poetry, David? I'm sorry, Casey, I'm taking over your podcast.
That's my plan.
That's a good question.
I didn't show up with questions today, and that was my goal.
I gotcha. So.
I think in a way it is. One of my, as soon as, let's see, I'm kind of I don't identify as a poet. Let's say that, right? So I'm a songwriter.
You're among friends, David.
You're all right.
So I always wonder, would my songs stand alone really well without music?
Yeah.
And would they bring you something, would they hit you somewhere? Would they bring something of value to you if I weren't singing them to you? So I think it's a great question. It's not necessarily one I've answered. I'm when it comes to songwriting, I'm a lyrics heavy kind of guy. So maybe in that respect, I lean towards that side of things. But I think I still wonder.
Yeah. Did you see the movie Yesterday?
Yes.
Did you think it was a huge dick move for him to win the writing contest? I thought that movie was terrible, but I also thought it was delightful. But like,
all right.
It could have been done so much better by people who love the Beatles. But hey, I didn't get my shot. But did he when he outwrites Ed Sheeran, and then Ed Sheeran like walks away like sad, and I was like, Ed Sheeran's song was fucking gorgeous, and then he's like, I don't know. I thought that was. Were you like, man, that's a dick move? This is a huge turning point in the movie.
I thought it was odd because, and I mean, this might sound totally naive, but my experience has been that songwriters are not that competitive.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, nobody's going to get pissed because they found something beautiful. Yeah. You know what I mean?
They've done like Battle of the Bands and all that sort of stuff. Nobody gets off the stage and is just like vehemently pissed.
We should have trained harder.
It's not like you're about to get in the ring and like actually fight each other literary deathmatch style. Boom, boom.
I love what you said though, that nobody's going to get pissed when they find something beautiful.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, that's kind of goes into what you were saying before about, writing being kind of this engine of empathy, where you hear great writing, it can inspire you. It doesn't make you feel. Well, I do get jealous sometimes. I wish I'd written that.
Yeah, there's that line.
Absolutely.
I was about to say the same thing. There's that little like a twinge of like, ooh.
But I've never heard myself saying, if I couldn't have written it, I wish it had never been written.
Right. It's out there, and
that's
it's a good
huge.
thing that it
Yeah.
exists. It's
Yeah.
better that it exists.
Yeah,
And we can
better it
appreciate
exists.
that and love that.
But the funny thing about that movie is it kind of raises like an artistic ethical quandary that doesn't really exist.
Right.
You know, which is one of my beefs with it, because I feel like the question that the movie is asking is, okay, well, if this beautiful thing ceased to exist, would you put it back into the world, which will never happen to any of us. And I feel like it would be a more interesting film if it asked a question that makers of things, any kinds of things, actually faced. But
that's what I
it's
thought.
not like we don't have any ethical quandrums already.
Right. Yeah. Well, my big thing about that was that I thought that he should have, his goal should have been to get the Beatles into the world, because if he loved the Beatles, that's what would matter. So I thought at a certain point he should have become a producer and given a song to Lady Gaga and given a song to everybody that was huge and be like, hey, I wrote this song for you, and they'd be like, holy shit, I get to do Honey Pie or whatever. I don't know.
There would have been no
It's very
/ romantic journey in the movie.
There was anyway. I hate that movie was a dud.
I didn't see it. I
haven't seen it.
I was gonna say you're making me kind of glad I didn't see it.
I know.
I would
I
have loved it, but now I've
Sorry.
spoiled it. Now, it's like
all right.
it's not as much of a house of cards as say 3 Billboards Outside of Ebbing, Missouri. Which, if you push on any part of that movie, you're like, this is one of the worst movies that's ever gotten any recognition.
Yeah.
But yesterday, you start pushing on it, you're like, this is complicated. But at the same time, if you hadn't heard me talk about this and you would have seen it, you would have been like, I feel
very
delighted.
Cute.
Yeah.
It's very cute.
Yeah.
It seemed like it had a whimsical vibe to
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Was the kind of the main sell when they were doing the trailers and everything for it. So
I recommend seeing it so we can trash it together. So
that'd
I
be
can
perfect.
convince you that it's
reconvene at a later date.
And next we're going to talk about Saw.
I've never seen it, so you guys can tell me. And
Hey, Poets Talking About Movies is a podcast I might listen to.
that's
That
true.
actually sounds kind of interesting.
I'm already there for it, even if I'm not at the mic. Yeah,
Right?
this is
Yeah.
perfect.
Right.
Yeah.
I keep thinking about kicking off a podcast of authors talking about politics, but then I'm like, how long are we going to care about this stuff? We only got about a year and a half left on democracy, so I don't know. But
That's right. Before it all goes underwater.
Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, Brandon and I have kicked
Literally,
around
figuratively.
the idea of doing a podcast of looking at short story to film.
Oh wow.
And grading it, because I think it's unfair to anytime go novel to film. It's just unfair to judge, just because you have so much and you're condensing. But short story to film works really, really well. As we've seen, Fitzgerald, and we've seen, Field of Dreams, and we've seen these short stories turn into something beautiful. Because
And even Stephen King.
and even Stephen
of course,
King,
the Green Mile was
Yeah.
a
This is
novella length.
Novella. I'll be talking about Shawshank Redemption tonight. And
Shawshank's one. I was thinking.
Yeah.
I'll just spoil one of my, not really jokes, but he was sent a $5,000 check by the director of Shawshank Redemption to option the short story, and then years after the film was made, and it's one of the most successful films in terms of it keeps making money.
Yeah.
And King framed the check that he had never cashed, and he mailed it back to him, and he said, use this for bail money if you ever need it.
That is
Steve.
fantastic.
Yeah, that's pretty cool.
And I think, and you're a screenplay writer, so that, to condense is so much more difficult than it would ever be to expand. And I think what some producers and writers and directors have done with the short story is brilliant. And but every time you ever read a novel and you see the film, you're like, that was awful. They missed all this, and you can't blame them for it. You can blame them on theme, and you can blame them on tone, and you can blame them on who they picked for the main character, or the protagonist or the antagonist or whatever it might be. You can blame them for that. You can say the theme was off, the tone was off, the feeling of the movie did not match the book, and that's something you can say, you messed up. But when it comes to not getting everything in, that's not a fair judgment.
I just realized what we should really do is launch a podcast of writers talking about what podcasts they'd launch, because that's what this is.
I was thinking there was a very meta aspect to it. It's just, this is a podcast about talking about making a podcast with people who are on podcasts.
Yes.
But I've also heard that The Goldfinch, the biggest knock against that is that it should have been a limited series. So that's kind of an interesting thing, that now novels could become that if people want to spend that kind of money. But yeah. What were you about to say, Kara?
I was just going to say, I guess your view, how you view like the successful adaptation of a text into a film probably depends on whether or not you feel like the film necessarily owes the book any allegiance, because I think it's a different art form, and I'm not a filmmaker, so I don't know what would be necessary to successfully translate like the nucleus of a text into a film. And I'm thinking now about like Lolita or something, you know, a film like that, which is totally different from the book, but is a lot of people also regard as a kind of film masterpiece. But it really does its own thing.
I think The Shining's probably a great example.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, that's another one too.
I think it's a great podcast. Poets talking about texts of movies and how it texts to film.
I understand why we got to cut out fiction writers all the time.
I know.
Considering that I just wrote a book of poems about a movie that was based on a book, and the movie Blade Runner is super different from the book. Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep? But when Philip K. Dick saw the movie for the first time right before he died, right before the movie was released, he said, "How did you get inside my head?"
Wow. That's
so
badass.
it did capture something that was important to the writer.
The poetry of the piece, right?
I like to think so.
The essence.
Yeah.
I don't know. Coming at it,
of course,
from
you'd call it the poetry.
Yeah,
that's right. Have to keep the themes going here. Genres, yeah. I don't know. I spent, I guess in the introductions, I kind of left out. I've been helping a friend of mine with a student film, and I've played a small role. I got to be a cult leader.
Nice.
That was great. Yeah, I threw a knife into someone. I get killed with a guitar. It's fantastic.
I think that's going to give you an advantage in the death match.
Yeah, it was pretty great. I should have shown up in my crimson robe. I should have asked the director if I could have kept my robe, actually. And even just reading a screenplay for a short film, just from an actor's perspective, you have to create that essence of the character. You have to create a psychology. Mine was a pretty simple role. I had about 2 lines, just screamed out stuff about the Dark Lord. It was great. Maybe recreate that later.
We can only hope.
We can only hope. But the big thing, I think, is you have with film production, as opposed to actually getting out the literature, is that you have maybe 1, 2, it would be crazy, but maybe even 3 writers tops working on it. Then you have maybe an editor or so to look over the script. And then otherwise, you're dealing with the director trying to bring out that vision. You have each actor playing their part. You have everyone who's operating sound equipment, film equipment, just every little nuance that goes into translating that literature to film. It's a challenge. So even getting a smidgen of that essence, I feel like, is really impressive and powerful in filmmaking. And when you can nail it down, like in the case of Philip K. Dick, then it's just pure magic.
It's amazing. Do you know what the K in Philip K is?
I think it's Case.
No, it should be Case.
Yeah.
Bye, Laura.
Bye. I don't want
rewriting
this conversation
Laura's
so
bored.
cool.
Okay, great.
I don't want to interrupt it, but I'm going to say bye until tonight.
We'll see you tonight.
We're not going to tell you why Laura's leaving. She's just leaving. She's bored.
I'm leaving because I have a baby that's very grumpy about taking a bottle. So I'm
Fair enough.
go take care of that, and then I'll be back.
All right, we're going to miss you.
See you tonight.
See you, Laura.
Babies on podcasts. The next
Babies on
podcast.
That's right.
With writers. Do you know the K? Can you remember?
But I can't remember it. It's
Kindred?
That's right. It's Kindred.
Yeah.
I'm like, it has something to do with the movie. Of course, I think everything has something to do with Blade Runner.
Yeah.
Certainly the word kindred does, though.
What did you think of the new one?
Yeah.
I enjoyed it.
Yeah,
I first I wished it didn't exist.
That's how I felt too.
When you really love a work of art, like if you have a favorite painting, you don't necessarily want to see like the poet or the painter do it over from a different angle.
It's like looking at Lady Godiva from the other side of the horse or something.
Right? Yeah. That's funny, but yeah, I thought I thought they did a great job with it. And part of you were just talking about the collaborative nature of film. I think all art is collaborative.
Yeah.
Yes.
Filmmaking perhaps more so than any other.
That's like insanely collaborative.
Yeah, for exactly what you were talking
without
about.
Without collaboration, so it takes a village to raise a child sort of thing, but the child is a full film production.
Exactly.
It's
But yeah.
I keep cutting you off, but I'm just to talk about that. It's like a film versus a book. Like it's almost like you'd have to have people type. Like, okay, you take the Y and the R, so you type it whenever I think that. Whereas, Anyway, sorry.
But I was going to say is that, all art's collaborative to a point. And I think the fact that they had some of the same, artists working on the sequel, I think, was a really important factor to its success.
Yeah, cinematography wise, that was one of the most perfectly shot films.
It was gorgeous.
I've ever seen. I had my reservations about a few things, but it was amazing. And I just want to take a moment to say, rest in peace, Rutger Hauer.
Oh my gosh!
Did
don't
he just
even.
pass, or is
he
that
did
a
pass about a
did.
few months ago.
Oh, yeah.
So
he was
he was a legend.
fantastic.
Hobo with a shotgun. I don't know if anybody saw him do that. They did the Grindhouse films. Quentin Tarantino and Robert Rodriguez did the collaboration, and then one of the fake trailers was Hobo with a shotgun.
Oh my god!
And
hilarious.
they ended up casting Rutger Hauer to play the hobo with the shotgun.
It's a
It was
slam dunk.
it was a huge hit. It was my favorite at Sundance that year. It was fantastic.
You know what Rutger Hauer loved, and this is true: poetry.
Oh really?
Yeah,
Well, there you go.
Oh, tying it all together,
tying it all together.
Anytime
tying
I've
the room
wanted to-
together like a good rug.
Anytime I've wanted to thematically write something, or I'm like, oh, I'm gonna write a book of whatever about spring. I don't know, but was there any moment when you were like, oh, I definitely don't want to write this much about Blade Runner, or were you like, man, I could write 100 more books about Blade Runner?
Every moment that I worked on it was, and I think this wasn't just my project, but I think it's all of us as writers. I got the idea, and it was like a fucking ray of sunshine in my heart. Like, I'm doing it. I ran it by a few people. They're like, if anyone's going to do it, you're going to do it.
Yes.
But then every time I worked on a poem, you'll never finish this. Why are you even trying? Who's going to want to read this? And
Yeah, nobody likes Blade Runner.
right. Well, please.
Oh goodness.
But you learn so much when I've been recommending to everyone, find a work of art. You say you do a lot of your Jake. I'm looking at Jake right now for all of you out there.
That's here. I'm being looked at.
Listening audience. That Jake said he gets a lot. He does a lot of his work, drastically influenced by other art. Find a work of art that you love and take that deep dive.
Oh yeah.
If it's a movie, if it's the work of a certain poet, and it will open up for you, and your art will respond.
Yeah,
So that sounds super pretentious. I'm really sorry.
No,
but
it does not at
There's
all. It's perfect.
Yeah, there's a
Yeah.
book called Waking the Dead that was adapted into a movie with Billy Crudup and Jennifer Connelly, and it's probably my second or third favorite movie. And my novel Collision Theory is hugely influenced because the emotional. I mean, I cry my eyes out every time I see that movie, and I could always go to that place, and the main female character is named Sarah because that. But yeah, David, if you were to deep dive on one piece of work and obsess over it enough to do a full collection of something.
Yeah, there's kind of two things I'd look into. One, I would love to write about Fernando Yort. He's a Latin American painter from El Salvador. He passed away not 2 years ago. And this is cool. He invented his country's folk art. So you go to El Salvador and you go to some shop where they sell tchotchkes, things, and I don't know, like places you can put your keys, right, or a little jewelry box, and they all have these kind of iconic, colorful shapes of animals and people, right, and really simplified shapes. He made that up. Essentially born in El Salvador, trained in Europe. He came back and opened all these workshops. As you can tell, this is already bordering on a novel.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So Fernando Yort has done amazing work. And the thing I love about him is that he marries modernity with folk art in a way that is just effortless.
That's cool.
Quick
That sounds
show,
exactly.
quick show of hands. Who around the table wants David to write this
Yeah,
book?
I think
I'm already there. Yeah,
100%.
hand is raised
Yeah.
high up in the air.
Yeah.
Wow.
That's awesome.
So Brandon's giving us the wrap up. We got to go and
In case you have
set
to tell
up.
me what you're gonna do.
Oh man, I was
With
going
a-
to give my
with-
Blade
inspired
Runner
by
tie-in.
something?
Yeah.
I'm completely blank.
Yeah.
I am completely. I think it's because I just got done with the book of essays on running, and I felt like Jan
Running.
I felt like Jan was saying that every time I started an essay on running, I thought there's no way I can do 80,000 words, and it ended up being 92,000 words. But the collection was, and I felt the exact same way. Like, I don't know if I can write another essay that uses running as that vehicle to jump into larger cultural, sociological issues. But it did, and it was. And I'm exhausted. I'm exhausted with writing right now. I'm really tired. So I think Kara was.
Oh yeah, Kara.
Oh, we're all going to
I
do
guess
a question
I just
for
wanted to
Jay?
do it. Do we have? Is Brandon? Is that okay if I make everybody answer? Because I'll just answer quickly that when I was growing up, every day I would eat waffles in front of the TV before I went to school, and that was when HBO had, I think, 3 movies, and one was Star Wars, and the other was On Golden Pond. And I'm trying to find On Golden Pond again because I was obsessed with it and I loved it so much. And I think like one of those two. But now that I'm saying it, maybe both. I think you might see a future ATZ On Golden Pond Star Wars mashup. Kara.
Well, I've done a couple of deep dives before in my life, but lately I've been circling around the idea of, I think it would probably be an essay in response to one of my favorite movies, Silence of the Lambs. In part about why I kind of find like some affinity with, in a figurative sense, Buffalo Bill.
Yeah.
Oh wow.
It's a fantastic movie.
Yeah.
I think the things, because I have to put an S on the end of the word thing there. It's kind of funny that Jan's done Blade Runner, because I actually had a Blade Runner and a film called Drive, starring Ryan Gosling. That sort of neon noir has affected my writing, as well as Western films and old like kung fu and samurai movies.
Wow.
So I think this sort of antique, like stylized violence, or like neon sort of aesthetic, as people call it, like the vaporwave aesthetic as they call it nowadays. I could definitely do an entire just set of poems where just blow up the language, do everything people do on the internet with Twitter and Instagram and all that stuff, and just really manipulate the white space and go at length sort of through a neon mist of samurais and 6-shooter guns and all that stuff.
It's fantastic.
That's cool. Brandon, can you answer?
I have a mic. That's a good
I know. I'm just trying to extend it. Once I find out we're closing
nice
up, I
co-op
try to keep
pin,
us
by the
going
way.
forever.
Yeah, I
All
know.
right, I'll shut up.
Brandon usually comes in with the zinger of a question at the end. but
You
he
guys
didn't have a
probably
mic.
couldn't hear it because he doesn't have a mic, but Brandon's answer was fantastic.
Yes, it was.
I'm in tears.
It was Snow White, and I think he's going to do an amazing job with it.
There are 9 dwarfs.
This is Case Johnston. Thank you, everybody, for coming out and talking with us today. I did not write a single question, and I am so glad because
Thanks for inviting me.
Because the conversation was a conversation like this always feels like it goes by in 3 minutes, and there's just so much more to say, and I appreciate everything that people have said here. This is Case Johnston. What city are we in again?
Ogden.
No,
Utah.
the what's the medal?
Oh, Bistrica, Romania.
So we are. This is Case Johnston, podcasting from the Monarch in Bistrica, Romania, and thanks again for listening. All right.